Call to order the March meeting of the Policy Committee. Start taking roll. Director Christie.
Here.
Director Walmsley.
Here.
Director Bevilacqua.
Here.
And I'm here as well, so there are 4 of us present. And do we have any public comment?
We do have one public commenter this evening, so I'll read the statement. Now is the time for public comment on agenda items. The board will follow the procedures established in policy 903. All individuals wishing to comment this evening were required to properly register prior to the designated start time of tonight's meeting by completing the information specified on the public comment registration card. When called to the podium, each commenter will begin by stating their first, last name, and municipality. Each statement made by the commenters will be limited to 3 minutes. Individuals will be notified by the time clock when their allotted time for public comment has expired. The board asks that all commentary be directed to the board as a whole. Public comment may be interrupted if it's or terminated if the commentary exceeds 3 minutes or if the commentary is obscene and or threatening in nature. The commenter this evening is Judy DeFonso.
Hi everyone, happy St. Patty's Day. Judy DeFonso. Still in the same place, same house, same everything in East Goshen. Tonight I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to start with a little story. It's about a kindergartner with special needs who was living in the TE school district. And she was given an assignment by her teacher, and she kind of made an ASL sign like this, only she maneuvered it in such a way that it was taken to be a weapon, or a facsimile of a weapon. And she also did that along with a threat of harm to her teacher. What should have been a teachable moment, given their policy, was that she ended up with a record with the local police department, because as part of their threat assessment, they were required to involve the police, and when the police were called, they record things, and let's just say parents were very upset over that. And I just wanted to say that I don't believe that our policies kind of reflect that sort of thing, where, you know, kind of things are kept more internally, and that if it's something like a frustrated special needs kindergartner, we're not going to really, you know, involve the police, and especially not give the child a record at the tender age of 5. I know that there's a gentleman down in, I think he's in Virginia, Guy Stevens, who runs the Alliance Against Seclusion or Restraint. And he kind of likes, when I talk to him, he's kind of liked our policies because we allow flexibility and admin judgment as part of the policy. One-size-fits-all policies, let's just say there was an advisory committee of zero tolerance and school discipline policies back in October of 2016, and they found that zero tolerance policies tended to over-identify individuals of color and students with disabilities. So I think that our policies avoid that, and I just wanted to say, you know, thank you for kind of keeping that trend. And my other thought was policy 703 and teachers being responsible for the condition of their classrooms. I think teachers are responsible for so many things. I don't know that we need to put another burden on them. I think that the custodial staff, as well as the teaching staff, kind of have to take responsibility. I mean, you know, stuff happens with kids. I mean, if you've been a parent, you know how stuff comes out of nowhere, and stuff happens. So, and that's all I wanted to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is approval of the February committee meeting minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? That's 4 ayes. And tonight we'll begin our meeting with a review of some policies that require annual review prior to the new school year, and then continue with the remaining Section 600 policies, and finally begin our review of Section 700. So let's start with policy 113.1.
Thank you.
As you said, this is a annual review for this policy, so we did just look at it last year around this time. There are no major changes, just some updated language to align with some terminology changes in the school code, and nothing in regards to our process has changed for discipline of students with disabilities.
Thank you. Any questions about that policy? If not, we can go to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? So that's 4 ayes. And then we have policy 113.2.
So this policy used to be called behavior intervention. Name change to behavior support is noted here. And this one has even fewer changes than the previous one, with shall being changed to may, and local law, and police department being changed to local law enforcement agency. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions about that policy? If not, we can move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? It's 4 ayes. And then that's policy 218.2.
Good evening, everyone. So this is policy 218.2, terroristic threats. Similarly to Ms. Kleiman, some of the language was updated, some minor changes to align with school code.
Thank you. Any questions about that policy? If not, we can go to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? That's 4 ayes for policy 236.1. We're now on to 247. Oh, I'm sorry, I
That's
skipped
okay.
ahead. That was 218.2, now we're on to 236.1.
Thank you. Again, annual review for our threat assessment. There are really no changes here, just a deletion of the definition of the word bias, that's all.
Thank you. Any questions about policy 236.1?
I have a question. So towards the end of the policy, third paragraph in the bottom, there's a strikeout on and the and a slash. Is that all one title? Safety and Security Coordinator, Public Safety Manager?
Yeah, it's the same person.
One of the terms is statutory, the other is what the district calls it, and it's the same role in the district.
Okay, I just want to make sure there wasn't supposed to be like a comma in there, because a Safety and Security Coordinator and a Public Safety Manager sound like two different jobs.
And that's why we have the dash, because one is, up
Okay.
until last year, they were two different jobs in the district, because one's a statutory requirement that has to do that person has to do certain things, and the other was a district position that did other things. And now those are combined together, but we need to continue to reference the one term so we can
So
track
it's
with the
either or.
school code. Yeah, so right now that position's held by the same individual. You could have a situation where if that job could reorganize, and if that's the case, then both of those individuals would need to be part of the team. We debated on whether to use a slash, use an and or, but we didn't want to do an or because if they were two different job functions, then it's not an or. Both of them need to be there.
Both be required, so it
Yeah.
would be and, but we don't have both, so.
Yeah, so that's why we ended up with the slash. There actually was a fair amount of debate about that.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that policy?
Why was that definition deleted in whole?
We, it's unlike the other definitions in the policy, it's not a statutory definition. We do continue to carry bias in the administrative guideline. It's something the threat assessment team is supposed to be trained on, and obviously when evaluating a situation, they shouldn't be biased for or against any type of student, but the term could have different meanings depending on the training that the team utilizes. But the training remains in the administrative guideline on that topic.
Any other questions? If not, we can move to a vote on policy 236.1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? That's 4 ayes, and now we move on to policy 247.
So there were minor changes to policy 247, hazing. One of the areas that was added was discrimination on page 2, discrimination and/or harassment. You'll notice there's some changes to not just a report in writing, but also an oral report would also qualify for that. But other than that, just generally requirements to run the school code.
Thank you. Any questions about that policy? If not, we can vote on policy 247. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? 4 ayes, and now we're on to policy 254.
Policy 254 is educational opportunity for military children. There was a section added regarding National Guard or Reserve has now been included in the policy.
Thank you. Any questions about that policy? If not, we can vote on policy 254. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? 4 ayes on that. And now we can move to section 600. We're going to start with 626.
Good evening, thank you. Policy 626 is federal fiscal compliance for annual grants. Minor changes to this, it's updated to reflect some of our current practices. It changed my title from a business manager to the director of business affairs. It removed the word regulations, went to guidelines, and the rest of it is really just language cleanup, nothing of substance.
Thank you. Any questions about 626?
Typo. Unless you're the director of business affairs.
Thank you. Well noted.
Any other questions? In that case, we can move to a vote with the correction of the typo. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? It's 4 ayes. Now we're on to policy 626.1.
Thank you again. This is travel reimbursement associated with federal programs, so we do have to have a separate policy for federal programs as well as a policy for our general fund expenditures. They are very, very similar, but this did have a few changes, updated language, and the option to develop an administrative guideline.
Thank you. Any questions about this policy? If not, we can vote on policy 626.1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? 4 ayes, and now 627.
Thank you. 627 is grants from external sources. Minor changes in this, including the option for an administrative guideline. We did take out some of the examples. Our previous policy had examples listed, but it was not inclusive. It was not a fully inclusive list of examples. Feel no need to have a partial list of examples, so it's just everything. So it relates to everything.
I feel like that's consistent with what we've been doing, to take out things that are either too specific or just generally unhelpful like that. Any questions? If not, we can vote on policy 627. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? 4 ayes, and now 628.
And this one actually has less changes. 628, use of proceeds from sale of district land and buildings. The previous policy was formerly the use of proceeds from district land and buildings. So we changed the title to agree with PSBA. Recommended language, minor revisions, and again, the option to develop administrative guidelines.
Thank you. Any questions about that? We can vote on policy 628. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? 4 ayes. Now policy 701.
Okay, policy 701. Let's do this next thing here. Okay, so policy 701, the first portion of it that was changed, originally it directly tied to the comprehensive plan as the first step in the process. And the language was basically changed to look at short-term and long-term plannings in accordance to the comprehensive plan instead of the comprehensive plan being the initial driving agent. It's actually in accordance with the comprehensive plan, so that we're making sure that the programming aligns appropriately. The next noticeable change here is that previously we were keeping track of a census of all live births in the area, and we have changed that to basically keep an enrollment Next piece is to actually include the language to referring to the current condition of the facility. So before it's just an existing physical facility, now we're including language that refers to the interior and exterior of the building. And then ultimately, how we report the enrollment of students for the building, or for the buildings for the district. Small change here, again, in reference to student population, removing some language, and then making a recommendation for how we do redistricting process for future projected trends, demographics. Adding the ability to add administrative guidelines at the superintendent's discretion or designate, and then a couple other just small changes in the process. Like I said, schools removed several times throughout it.
And Wayne, I look at most of the additions here are reflecting common practice, the current practice we have today. So it's reflecting what you and John do today.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Page 6 is an item on the property and finance, in many ways.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Any other questions about this policy?
And I think that, just one small one, formatting at the beginning, so like purpose would normally be bold and underline, right? I think the highlighting somehow messes things up, maybe remember.
Got it.
Like, yeah, and there probably should be another, a line between the paragraph and authority.
Any other questions? If not, we can move to a vote on policy 701. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? That's 4 ayes. And our next policy is policy 701 AG1.
So policy 701 AG1, there's just a couple small changes here. We struck out the portion that ties it back to policy 701, which goes without saying, this is an administrative guideline that ties back to it. Some language changes, changing the director of elementary and secondary education to the assistant superintendent, which is appropriate to our structure. And then just a removal at the bottom that basically prohibits us to name buildings after folks that are still living or involved in the district.
Thank you. Any questions about this AG?
I just want to clarify that removal at the bottom, that's still your practice, it's in the policy though, so we didn't feel the need to repeat it again in the AJ.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, being consistent with what we've been doing over the past couple of years, getting rid of redundancies and things, where that's just add extra words. Any questions about this AG? If not, we can move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? It's 4 ayes. Now we're on to policy 702.
Thank you. 702 is now titled Gifts and Donations. Formerly was Gifts, Grants, and Donations. We did adopt a separate policy on grants, which I believe went through first reading last month, so it'll be for second reading this month. So we have knocked grants off of this, so it is just now gifts and donations. Minor changes. The previous policy was written in entirety that the board had the authority to do everything, and never did it say the board or the designee, so you'll see that it now says board or designate. So although the board does accept the gifts, it comes to the superintendent, and the superintendent is the designate in most of the instances. Other than that, there are no other changes of substance.
Thank you. Any questions about that policy? If not, we can move to a vote on policy 702. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? 4 ayes. And then we have 702.1.
Thank you. Policy 702.1 is a little bit confusing. I will let you know you currently have this policy. It's listed as 229.1. The 200s fall under students. We specifically wrote our policy to not allow students to do crowdfunding, so this really should be in staff or business operations because we do not want our students doing crowdfunding. So although we cannot get rid of 229.1 until this has gone through both readings and approved, so until we get a second reading, this will then be coming back, and I'm correct, right? We'll be coming back to remove 229.1.
We need a crowdfunding policy, but that 200 level crowd, it will not be it.
No. So there is just some minor language change in there and clarifications of who is allowed to do crowdfunding, and that the superintendent or designee can develop administrative guidelines, and it's specifically the throughout the policy does not list students at all. So we will not have students be the ones who are actually crowdfunding.
That makes sense. Any other questions about this policy? I actually did have one question about it. Would something like a teacher sharing an Amazon wish list be governed by this policy, or is that elsewhere?
I'm gonna say it's covered by this policy.
That was kind of my thought, even though it doesn't necessarily mention that specifically.
Correct. I will tell you, as a district, we try to discourage
Yes.
that, but it would be included in this policy.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, we can move to a vote on policy 702.1. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? 4 ayes, and then we have policy 703.
Okay, policy 703, a couple small changes with the removal of the word school. In the delegation of responsibilities, we've added designee to the director of facilities and operations or designee. Slight change, change in the responsibilities for this policy to fall to the director of facilities and operations and not directly to the superintendent. A couple small changes in language regarding regulations. Responsibility shift from custodial staff generally to head custodians specifically assigned to each building. Teachers responsible for maintaining the conditions of their classroom has been added. And just for clarification, that's not in reference to the cleanliness of the classroom, that's in reference to them keeping their rooms orderly. Removal of principals and building head custodian being added with regard to inspections of the spaces. Superintendent being changed to the director of facilities and operations, again, with regard to making the space safe and clean. And then just the opportunity for the director of facilities and operations to add administrative guidelines.
Thank you. Any questions about this policy? If not, we can move to a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? All right, then we can move to policy 704.
Again, with policy 704, just the removal of the word school, a couple small changes grammatically through the delegation of responsibility. The change, again, shifts from the superintendent to the director of facilities and operations or designee. And ultimately, again, the ability to add administrative guidelines if we need to.
Thank you. Any questions about this policy? We can move to a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? We can move on to policy 705.
Policy 705, again, struck the word school in a couple of locations. Changed the word regulations to guidelines, very minimal changes. The ability, again, for the superintendent to generate administrative guidelines as needed. The addition of the word workplace in the safety committee. And then a change a little bit in structure. Previously, the entire cabinet was expected to be part of the workplace safety committee. This now aligns with school code and requires a minimum of 2 administrators and 2 employee representatives, so that we're approaching this with equal representation. The changing from periodically to monthly specifically, and then just the need to maintain agendas, which is again always been our practice, agendas and attendance lists.
Thank you. Any questions about policy 705? If not, we can move to a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? We're on to 706.
Thank you. 706 is property records. Minor changes, remove the word school, remove the reference to is/her, and allow the option for administrative guidelines to be developed and implemented if needed.
Thank you. Any questions about this policy?
Change business affairs
That will spell it.
We can move to a vote then. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? We're on to 706.1,
Thank you again. District properties disposal procedure, a lot of it is just changing in removing the word school, his, her language, the ability to develop administrative guidelines, changes some titles, it used to say purchasing agents, now purchasing manager. We moved in one section, you'll see that it is highlighted under guidelines that before we dispose of anything, it should be determined if the items may be useful at another school. That used to be listed, but it wasn't in the guideline. We think that that should be a guideline, so it's here but struck out later in the policy. And I believe we added Director of Facilities and Operations and the Purchasing Manager or designee for people to determine whether these items should be sold, disposed of, or whatever. There were too many items that were coming out of facilities, and there was no reference whatsoever to the Director of Facilities looking at these items. So
Yeah,
it aligns with our practice.
Should be the director of facilities who ultimately has control over that.
Correct. It is our practice, but our policy didn't state it.
Any questions about this policy? We can move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Now we're on to retiring policy 707 AG4.
So policy 707 AG4 was in reference to facility use applications. It was in essence the form that was filled out. We've moved to an electronic platform several years ago, and it's just no longer necessary.
That makes sense. We do need to vote though since it's being retired, correct? All right. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? And same thing for 707 AG5.
Correct. It's also being retired for the same reason.
Any questions about that before we vote?
And when, just an aside, the process is much more efficient for administration, but also for users, right?
Correct.
Salute.
Yep, absolutely. Everything now is right online in front of them. It can be referenced back to. It's definitely a cleaner process for everybody involved.
Thank you. All right, we can vote to retire that policy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? And then our last policy is 708.
Okay, policy 708. Again, a couple small changes here. Removal of the word school, specifically referencing and delegation of responsibilities. In the past, it used to say the request of the intended user, written request of the intended user is just ultimately being changed to the intended user shall make the request and receive approval in writing. So no form or no form in the way that it was managed in the past. And then the next part of it is just the ability to add the administrative guidelines should we see fit.
Thank you. Any questions about policy 708? If not, we can move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right, that then takes us to our informational items. We'll receive an informational update on some administrative guideline revisions.
AG 236.1, AG1 was just updated to reflect the language changes that we made in the policy. Nothing with regards to our practice with regards to status. Oh my goodness, I can't talk. Threat assessment has changed.
Thank you. Any questions? And since these are informational, we will not be voting on these. And then we have 247 AG1.
And similarly, just minor revisions to the reporting form for 247 AG1.
Thank you. And we have 626 AG1.
Nothing of substance there. This is updated language, realignment of items of cost, and taking out, again, some of our references, but not a full list of references to use as examples. We also updated the thresholds, but that is updated every year. Thresholds for bid requirements.
And we have 626 AG2.
AG2 is cash management of federal programs. Again, minor changes with wording, nothing of substance.
Same policy AG3.
Correct, and I'm going to give you the same answer.
Yeah.
Nothing of major substance, just a change of wording and removal of a few items.
And the AG4.
Procurement for federal programs, that one I might need to check. That is the thresholds for, so this is updated every year, that is the thresholds for what our bid requirements are. So this you will see each year comes back to the board. So this is just an annual update.
And you'll see that there's a fair number of internal reference changes. That's because in October of 2024, the federal government updated things, and they didn't really change a lot of what the law was, but they moved the sections all around. So some of where it's directed at things, well, that's not that section anymore, so we've had to
If you
update
want to
that.
figure out what federal law governs what
Yeah.
we're talking about, that number has changed, but not the
Yeah.
substance.
Correct.
All right, then we have 701 AG2.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, there were just a couple minor revisions made to that as well.
And we have 702 AG1.
That's a back and forth. That one is me. So that's ground funding administrative guidelines. Again, changes to follow our actual practices, make sure there was nothing in there referencing students. We added that software devices, other technology must be approved by the Director of Informational Technology. That was not in there before. I think that needs to be in there. We don't want to accept and have crowdfunding for people to be accepting technology-related items and us not being able to utilize them. Other than that, the changes really are just to align with what our current practices
Right.
are.
And then this next one, 702.1 AG1, is what you referenced earlier with the students, correct?
Correct. Thank you.
And we have 706.1 AG1.
That is me as well. That is the administrative guidelines. I don't think we changed anything on that though. Administrative, yes, we did, I'm sorry. Language. One of the bigger things that we did put in there though is a little bit of protection for the district. At the end, it says, I further understand and agree that I have the opportunity to expend the equipment. We did not have any clause in there for our equipment that we are donating and or selling or whatever we're doing. So we did put a clause in there to make sure that they have acknowledged that
They
it
knew what
comes
they were
at-
getting.
It's as is. There is no warranty.
All right, and then 708 AG1.
708 AG1 is me as well, and that one I actually don't think we had too many changes.
Yeah, that's the section they.
It's the form for lending.
Yeah, there were just a couple language changes with that one as well, some minor changes.
Thank you. And then just for informational purposes, policy 254 AG1 had no changes. The following policies are under further review: 235.1 AG1, 707, and 707 AG1. And then we have a whole list of policies that will be in second read. And unless anyone has other questions, our next committee meeting will be not on March 17th. It will be on April 22nd. Thank you. And that concludes our meeting for tonight. Thank you.
Just a All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to get started with tonight's property and finance meeting. First item we have is roll call. Director Parkinson,
Here.
Director Walmsley,
Here.
Director Christie.
Here.
Everybody's here tonight, Justin? All right, the next thing we have is any public comment tonight. Justin?
Yes, one comment. Judy DeFonso?
Hello again. Still living in East Goshen, still Judy DeFonso. Nothing's changed from earlier in the evening. I'm gonna be very brief tonight. I've been involved with like sustainability and recycling and all that kind of stuff since I was a kid. It's kind of an interest of mine. And with the talk about the compostable trays that we're gonna be moving to, I got some information from Mr. Scully and kind of did a little digging, and just in the interest of transparency, the compostable trays are industrial compostable trays, and they have to kind of go to a industrial facility in order to actually, you know, like it kind of require specific kind of enzymes or bacteria and higher pressure and higher temperatures. And I don't believe that we have a facility like that in the area, and I would love if our administration could kind of keep us appraised of, you know, going forward as to whether the trays are going into the landfill or whether they're going to be going to an industrial compostable facility. Again, once WIS opens in the area, you can advocate for more places doing this, but until that exists, and you know, and again, just more in the interest of transparency, I just wanted an awareness of the situation. So, and that's it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. We'll provide more updates at a later date. All right, the next thing on the agenda for tonight is the approval of the February 18th meeting minutes. Anybody on the Property and Finance Committee have any comments? All right, seeing none, we'll vote on the approval of the February 18th Property and Finance minutes as stated. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. All right, Justin, we're good for nothing there. All right, the next item, Mr. Scully is going to review the March budget forecast model.
Thanks, Gary. I'm going to start with the changes for the 24-25, so that's the current year that we are in. That should be page 5 of the forecast model. Changes that we made for our expenditures, we have reduced our teacher salaries by $300,000. Most of that is in blue time cards or extra duty pay. We're noticing that we're not seeing as what we'd anticipated in extra duty pay, whether that be the rate, the people participating in extra duty, or the actual hours of extra duty, but we are trending later than we had budgeted for that. You'll see the next reduction is a reduction in paraprofessionals or aides. I want you to see that is actually just a reclass. As a reclass out of salaries into contracted services. As you're aware, we have paraprofessionals both from a contracted service and from an employee standpoint. We actually have more contracted paraprofessionals right now than we do of in-house paraprofessionals. So that is just a switch, the delta being 0. I've also increased our expenditures by $200,000 for that PHEAA grant, the THEA grant. They are student teachers, so that is a grant. It is a wash through the district, so no impact on millage. It's a $10,000 grant to our student teachers, all part of THEA, but it does pass through the district. So you will see an expense for $200,000, and down in the revenue line item, you'll see a offsetting revenue of $200,000, which is the last item in the revenue section. Other changes to revenues, I've increased our current real estate taxes. That is based on actual collections, so I did increase it last month as well, as we still see revenues coming in either from current real estate taxes or interim taxes. I will classify them both as current real estate taxes. So I've increased our revenue projections by $434,000. Our earned income and transfer taxes, both of them I've increased by $150,000. For obviously that'll be over $300,000. So the increase in our ending fund balance for 24-25 is an increase of $1,034,000. I'm using all of that to help offset the needed millage impact for 25-26. So are there any questions on 24-25? If not, I'll jump to the changes for 25-26, and then we can talk about where we are with millage and the fact that we are actually at a legal budget at this point.
We can proceed as you are, and I think we're trending in a positive nature and continue to trend on a monthly basis in the right direction.
Yeah. For 25-26, I do have an increase. I did an increase for expenditures for charter school tuitions. We saw an increase of 24 students in the current month. So February into March, we saw 24 students going into charter schools. So that is gonna obviously increase our charter school tuitions. The majority of them came from private schools. They came from a private school and went into a charter school, most of that being cyber schools. So we're not seeing kids jumping out of our buildings. There were a few, but not many. The majority of them did come from a private school and went into the cyber schools, cyber charter schools, excuse me. So I am increasing. I think we're okay for this year. If not, we'll have to find savings in another category. But I think our projections for the current year are okay, but I'm concerned if that trend continues, that we were a little too light on our charter school tuitions for 25-26. I increased our revenues in 25-26 for facility rentals. We are seeing an increase in the rate and the number of fields that are being rented. So we did increase our facility rentals by $100,000 and state revenue for our charter school subsidy. The current governor's budget does not have the line item for charter school reimbursement. So that was in years ago. It was taken out years ago. We haven't seen it in years. This year it was in. So for 24-25, the budget did include a charter school reimbursement. So it was, I believe, about 11% reimbursement on what your expenditures were. That is not a line item in next year's budget. So for conservative purposes, I think we need to remove it out of our budget because I don't know what's going to happen with the governor's budget, but I certainly don't want to budget something that's not even included in his preliminary budget. So that budget cap is a change of 444. So all of that being said, we put it all through the model. Our millage as it stands right now is at 3.8%, which is finally below the Aquin index of 4%. We know we still have more work to do, but we're no longer in a gap. We can at least pass the preliminary budget and keep working, but we'll keep working on our forecasts for 24-25 and projection changes for 25-26. We'll be back in April with a preliminary budget. I do anticipate that it will be lower than the 3.8. I don't know where we'll be, but we will be below the 3.8 as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
John, do you have any thoughts or ideas as to what's driving the transferring of students into the cyber charter schools?
I don't, because they're not coming from our building, so we would have no survey data. I guess we could dig into that, but that's at a parent's will whether they even want to provide us that information or not.
Thank you.
I think John, it's a good story still. As we said, we're trending in the right direction. We'll continue to look at that for the preliminary budget freight pulling going forward, but I think we're in positive shape and we'll continue to look for reductions as we go month by month.
My only other concern, although we do have a fund balance that could cover, my other concern is funding from the federal government. So I assume flat funding from the federal government, meaning we'll get the same amount that we got this year. I have no idea where that stands. I don't think anyone at this table knows where that is going to stand, but I do have a concern about our federal revenues. It's close to $6 million that I have included in this budget to balance this budget. But it's enough.
And as that information becomes available in the future, we'll have to talk about that as we get some clarity there.
Correct. Thank you.
Yep, everybody good there?
That's information we're
Forecast
me
model.
to vote.
Yep, correct. All right, the next thing is, if you remember last month, we talked about a parameters resolution for 2 bond borrowings. John's going to give us an update, and then tonight we do have an approval item to approve the parameters resolution.
Yep, so just quickly, if you recall, John Fry was here last month, talked to the board and the committee about the opportunity for a possible refi of about $25 million, and then borrowing $30 million additional. That $30 million additional borrowing was included in the capital plan update that Wayne and I presented last year. I believe it was March of '24. We had targeted $30 million of borrowing. We had said active borrowing, we had said it would probably be about the January timeframe. We've now pushed that. We think that we're okay till April or May. So this parameters resolution is authorization for us to go out to bid if the board approves it. So I will need a formal vote next week from the board to move forward with this. There is always the option to reject the bid. That's why we do the parameters resolution, so it allows myself and the bond counsel to go out, sell the bonds. If they come in at a favorable rate within the parameters resolution at a rate that is favorable for the district, we have the authorization to say yes, and we don't need to come back to the board for board approval. In the past, we used to have a special board meeting that night. This is kind of our workaround of having to have a board meeting that night. But we are looking to go out to sell our bonds. So we can do it either as just $30 million of new borrowing, $55 million of old Or borrowing of 25 million, refinance and $30 million of new money, or we can reject the entire thing if the rates are too high. Caution with rejecting the whole thing is that the district will need money for projects that we've already committed to and are in the process for, and we will start to fizzle that money out probably in the July timeframe.
And I think, John, just to reiterate, the bond market still looks favorable for us.
Market still looks favorable, even for the refunding that we have, it would still show us a savings in the refunding based on today's rates.
So before we go to the committee for approval, anybody on the PNF committee or the board have any questions on the parameters resolution? All right. Seeing no comments, to the Property and Finance Committee, we do have a motion for approval of the parameters resolution as stated by Mr. Scully for the 2 bond borrowings and to allow PDM, our financial consultants, and John to proceed with the going to the market for those 2 bond refunds financing. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. All right, Justin, we're good for nothing. We'll move forward with the parameter resolution, and then we'll bring that forward to the board for formal approval.
Correct, so that'll come back to the board next week. Formal approval cannot be a consent agenda item, and I do need a roll call. I cannot do a yay nay.
We'll do official roll call at that point.
Thank you.
Ms. Fisher will take care of that. All right, the next item, we have a visitor tonight, Dr. Ulmer, and he's going to present to us a contract for Comply software.
Thank you, Mr. Bevilacqua. Hi, everybody. Good evening to everyone. We are seeking approval from the Board of School Directors to purchase the Comply program through EduLink Incorporated. It will track and manage employee fulfillment of district requisites, state mandates, and other important compliance items that we do by hand at this point. Currently, the district is using multiple platforms that require extensive manual tracking and input to ensure compliance for legally required local, state, and federal mandates. We are looking at a 3-year contract starting for the 25-26 school year. The cost for a 3-year contract would be $77,695, which includes a 5% multi-year discount and a 5% PA-ETAP client discount. The fee is based on the total number of staff that we employ. Do I have any questions?
Yeah, one for you, Dr. Ulmer. So,
Sure.
so I think it's clear on what the contract is and what it's used for. It's replacing manual type administrative work now, so there's big benefits of that, and the price looks pretty good for 3 years. Can you explain just any familiarity with this software product or other surrounding school districts that use Comply today on what we based our
Sure.
assessment on?
Well, the one thing that I can speak to is we had several demonstrations here at the district where Comply, with our board members, showed everything that they could here. They did it on like a live placement where they put names, clearances, all of the vector trainings we have to do, all of our trainings, everything was housed in one spot. And right now, we have so many different platforms that are just not enabling us to keep up with all the demands of the state that gives us a new thing to do every year. So Comply will promise that they will keep up with everything. I know that Dr. Christopher, they use Comply over in Cumberland.
Yeah, Cumberland Valley uses this. They said, I think we talked to them, that they have over 200 school districts in Pennsylvania that were using this software. It is an add-on to the evaluation software we already use, which is PA-ETAP, so this is an additional component to the software we use to do all of our teacher evaluations and administrative evaluations, actually teacher evaluations only in the district. One of the biggest challenges, we have a lot of state mandates, as you guys know, that come up in terms of training, in terms of clearances, in terms of, this is gonna be a one-stop location for all of that. Teachers would log in, they would have all the required things that they have to get done. We would have automatic things going out to them when their clearances are coming due, when they're running out of, like, so it manages a lot for us. And we put it all in that place that a user interface they should be familiar with as well. So I think there'd be some big benefits to automating things that we're doing currently manually in HR, which I know we've talked about.
We have.
So I assume this includes like reporting and things, right? Because
Absolutely.
we have to be running a far greater exposure than $77,000, right? To be
Absolutely.
compliant, so.
100%. And the great thing about Comply is instead of me having to check 4 or 5 different programs of who doesn't have what, I'll just get one report. And then Comply, we can set how often it reminds our employees to get things done. So that's another big help too. That it will put the onus on our employees rather than having us having to catch up later.
Is that completely manual today? Like, how are you even getting alerts when?
We have several programs, and then I check them daily to see when the due dates come, and then I contact our employees. That's how we have to do it right now.
What do you do with all that time now?
What's that?
He's gonna retire.
5 months, but who is counting?
Thank you, Dr. Ullman.
I have
Dr.
another
Yeah, go ahead.
So these other platforms that you're currently using, are we contracted with any of them? They're all free
No,
things?
these are people that we have contracted through that will actually sync up with Comply. So,
Integrated system.
right, so Vector will be
It's not
part of
replacing, it's
Comply.
got it.
And, it's a great program that speaks to everything that we use.
So this isn't displace anything, this is like a wrapper that
This is a wrapper.
pulls everything together.
Yes,
So
and
you
it will
have-
enable us to do so much more.
So you have a single pane of glass in order to actually navigate all of that information.
Exactly.
Well, it will displace some manual work.
Yep.
I mean, like, it will reduce some of that
Oh, it
significantly.
displaces manual effort,
Yeah.
human labor, but it's not displacing
Another
a
cost.
system or.
Right,
But
we're
as-
not gonna
as-
be adding
As
costs.
we look at talent management and we look for capacity in HR, I mean, this is a lot of time, like this is something that they're spending a ton of time on right now that we are going to reduce. So now if we're looking at like employee engagement surveys and trying to help people understand that we have more opportunity to do that work that we really don't have right now.
Correct.
Yep, definitely a benefit. Anybody else on the committee or board have any
Yeah,
questions?
I of course applaud the effort to automate this process. The licensing fee, does that include anything else in terms of support or training or implementation? Is this all bundled into the 77K?
Yes, there will be, it is included for training, for them to work with our IT team to make sure everything runs seamlessly. Everything that contract's right there to give us as much help as possible.
Okay, that's good. And just curious, the headcount, is that based on current day actuals or will we project over the 3-year period?
It would be current day. So every year when we would renew, they would ask for how many professional employees we have, how many support, how many coaches, and then we'll go through the entire list and be able to have an exact count.
Yeah, but that shouldn't sway the cost too much more
No,
than
no, no.
what we expected.
No, it will not sway the cost much, but I'm happy that they'll just be able to capture everybody on there.
Right, thanks.
All right, thank you. So to the Property and Finance Committee, we do have a motion to approve the contract for Comply Software by EduLink. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. All right, 4-0, we're good with that. Thank you, Dr. Omar.
Thank you.
All right, the last items on the agenda for tonight are some property items. Mr. Burster is going to go over the approval of the 25-26 capital reserve project bid. And, excuse me, one quick one. Mr. Scully, that'll be consent, the item we just approved, right?
Yes.
Yep, correct. Just wanted to confirm. All right, Mr. Burster.
Okay, so for this evening, I have 4 25-26 capital reserve projects to bring in front of the board for approval and award. So the first project is G144, which is a district-wide playground project, which is a project that we've been carrying year to year. This year's allocation to the account was $100,000, and the amount for the work that we're requesting came in at $108,264. So this is to replace some outdated equipment at Fernhill Elementary School. The additional $8,264 I am asking to be applied to the account balance from the same G144 account or project, but from the 24-25 year. We still have a small account balance there, and I'd like to apply it to that. You want me to go through each one individually?
You go individually,
Okay.
that's fine.
So the next project is again a project that we carry from year to year. It's G145, which is the district-wide fencing project. This year's allocation was $75,000. We're asking to award to Integris Fence in the amount of $74,000.70. This is to replace fencing at multiple locations, Stetson, Ruston High School, and East High School this year. The next project is a district-wide flooring project, which is again a project that we have carried from year to year. The project established at $125,000. And we are asking to award to Donald Reisinger Incorporated in the amount of $93,695. That work will all be done this year at East High School, replacing various pieces of floor. And then the last project is G190, which is interior painting at East High School for the second and third floors. Again, the original project was budgeted at $243,900. We are asking to award to Donald Reisinger Incorporated in the amount of $147,975.
Wayne, we do have that one typo in G146 in the narrative, just to change the vendor name. In 146, in the narrative down below the table. It now says in generous fence and decks, it should be Donald Reisinger on G146, the floor replacement. You see what I'm saying? The narrative on the table.
146.
Yeah.
Mine's shown correctly.
Yeah. So mine.
Oh, like on ours it is.
It's on- in the
Okay.
narrative.
In the narrative below the table.
Okay.
I don't know if it's in there.
You may have a different version than we're saying. Our version still has the BR.
Yeah, if for some reason it's just on the page.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. If you corrected the other place, I just want to make sure.
It's in the
Correct.
actual document.
Okay, that's fine.
That's fine.
Yep, okay. Any questions on the capital reserve project bids as stated by Mr. Burster? All right, seeing none, we do have an approval item to approve these 4 projects, as Mr. Burster stated: the district-wide playgrounds, the district-wide fence repairs, the district-wide floor replacements, and the East High School interior painting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Just for good for nothing, as stated, thank you. And the last item, Mr. Burster has approval of capital plan updates.
So the capital program update that Mr. Scully and I presented in March of 2024, we had the Exton modulars to be removed this year, and in addition to replace that, we're requesting that we push that project 1 year to give us an opportunity to review the property. And currently, we're seeing enrollment projections that would require us to need that space, and moving the project would be at the detriment to the schools community. So we're asking that we push that project 1 year to allow us some time to further review it.
Any questions from any of the committee or the board?
So does the time buy you? Are you potentially able to add additional permanent space, or?
So the intention of the project itself is to remove the modulars and to add permanent space. I think it's more appropriate for Dr. Christopher to speak to the timeline.
Yeah, I think we're gonna need to do a spot redistricting, and that's what it's gonna buy time to do. Like really probably Exton Fernhill is what we're looking at. But we're gonna need to convene a redistricting committee here in the next month or two and really look at the Exton feeder specifically because of the development right here by the district office. So we do have some spare room currently at Fernhill, that we would be looking to do that.
I have a question. Will the final plan for the Exton Mall figure into this planning also, for the number of units going in there?
So I will say that it does not. So this addition space has actually already been designed. It was actually, we were actually prepared to go out to bid this month with that work. So that work has already been designed. However, I do plan on being at the Westland meeting tomorrow night to have a better understanding on where we are with things. That is certainly something we are watching very closely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this would, we're gonna have to move on this before we're gonna have definitive information about that, and that would be a completely different problem potentially. Depending on how many houses go up there, certainly, you know, a very different problem for us, but this is a 2-year, like we're gonna leave the modulars, we'll make it through next year, the following year we would be oversized already in Exton, so we have to move forward with that.
I think what we're doing from a district, both short-term and long-term, we're doing the appropriate thing, we're being diligent on understanding what we need to do in a short-term, long-term process. Anybody else have any other questions before we go to vote? All right, to Property and Finance Committee, we do have a motion to approve the capital plan update as just stated from Mr. Burster. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. 4-0, and both of these items will be consent going forward, so we just have the one approval for full board roll call for the parameters resolution only. Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Burster, appreciate the updates. And then the next Property and Finance meeting will be held next month on Tuesday, April 22nd. Was Monday a holiday? Have to look at a calendar. Anyway,
There's no school that day.
Hey,
it's a school day.
that's what I was wondering, that's Easter, okay, that's right, okay. So Tuesday, April 22nd, thank you. Easter's late this year, I think.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Thanks, I should know. All right, thank you, everybody, for attending. The TLR meeting will be next.
evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order tonight's Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee meeting. To start off with roll call. Dr. Herman?
Here.
Dr. Dietrich?
Here.
And Director Fry is not here today. I am, so 3 out of 4 of us are here tonight. Are there any public comments?
No.
Okay, there are no public comments, so we'll skip the public comment protocol. First approval item is approvals is sought for the minutes of the meeting that we held on February 18th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And our one action item is we're going to hear a presentation from Dr. Dormer about the new science resources. Dr. Dormer?
Yes, good evening. So we're here to discuss the proposal to adopt new core instructional materials for elementary science. So according to Board Policy 108AG1, it just outlines our process for selecting core instructional materials such as novels, nonfiction books, textbooks, and comprehensive programs, which is what we'll be speaking of tonight. Our committee does indeed consist of 4 teachers, a building administrator, central office administrator, and 2 parents and guardians of students who attend our schools. So an overview of the process, and for full transparency, Mr. Carr oversaw the majority of this process. We are in the process of transitioning our roles. So starting next school year, I will be jumping into the K-12 science and technology and engineering role along with FCS. So I'm excited to do that, and part of that will be talking through and selecting these materials. So in stage 1, there's a thorough analysis of the new STEEL standards and our comparison to our current curriculum and resources, and an initial exploration of a lot of newly published materials and a lot of advertised products. We previewed the materials, we consulted with local school districts, about 12 of them, to compare notes, and examined 13 resources, which we'll review in a second, for alignment and their value in our classrooms. The committee met throughout this school year and utilized several of the considered resources in classrooms to narrow down the focus. We narrowed the scope to 2 core instructional materials, and then conducted the committee process to formalize the vote and go through the criteria. So the programs reviewed are listed here: Activate Prime, Amplify Science, Carolina, Engineering is Elementary, FOSS, Generation Genius, Mystery Science, Open SciEd, STEM Scopes, TCI, TechBook, Twig, and Wonder of Science. A number of these programs came on the market around the time of a lot of the lockdowns and have since grown. A lot of them have developed new products in response to new standards. But we narrowed down to the 2 of FOSS and Mystery Science. And here are our committee members. So Dr. Sean Cruz was our building administrator. I, since I was not officially involved in the process until very late in the game, was the Spelman administrator. We had 4 teachers in various grade levels: kindergarten, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, and 2 parents, one of whom has a student in elementary school only, and another parent who has students in our district in elementary, middle, and high school. So as you've probably seen this before, you're very familiar with our criteria and the ratings. So there are 17 criteria that we evaluate core instructional materials on. Ratings span from excellent, good, fair, poor, or not applicable if it's deemed that it didn't apply to that particular resource. So overall, the committee voted, and again, there were 8 members. About 60% of the ratings landed in the excellent category for FOSS, which equates to about 10 out of the 17 parameters. In Mystery Science, it is 65%, so about 11 of the 17. 33% in the good category, again, about 5 of the standards or criteria. And in the fair and or poor categories, that equates to about 1. So you can see that Mystery Science is a slight lead in most of the areas, and definitely in the area of poor, which we'll get to in just a moment. So we wanted to share a couple of the comments, both about the FOSS program and about Mystery Science. So from the teacher perspective, they felt that FOSS was an excellent program if you pay for all the bells and whistles. They would love to teach from FOSS if the money or time was not a factor, With the limited time in elementary, everything that the program has to offer would not necessarily be used in the way that it should be. And that's from one of the teacher perspectives. From a parent perspective, FOSS seemed more complex, more thorough, but for the price difference, which was rather significant. They felt that the other program would be a better choice and easier for implementation and delivery in terms of the time and focus we could dedicate with students. With regard to mystery science, it was a significantly lower cost. So the teacher requested that we spend some money on customizing notebooks and incorporating nonfiction text. And that is something that we are very excited to do moving forward. We do a lot of science notebooking in the middle school grades and above. We have a progression for writing claim evidence or reasonings and all sorts of things. And we're really excited to expand that work and level it to the elementary level as well. So we will be developing our own notebooks and taking advantage of the opportunities to take this resource and really make it ours, make it that much better. Mr. Carr and I have used the term leveling up. And while it makes some teachers nervous about like, what does that mean? It just means we're just gonna make it awesome. There are so many ways to augment and to incorporate some more experiments, some more thorough and detailed investigations. And the one neat thing about phenomenon-based learning is that you really can just tap into that innate curiosity that so many of our students have. So from a parent perspective, there are some video components. To share a story from one of the teachers, it's really hard to go out and find a raccoon who's digging into the dirt yourself and to capture that specific moment. So it's nice that we have a resource that's able to do some of those things for us. It would be great if we could walk outside and be like, come here, dig a little bit. Not usually on call, you know, not quite on-demand reactions from nature. So our resources will provide some of those materials with us or for us, and then we can take it, you know, sky's the limit with what we do with our students and the questions that they ultimately end up asking when they see something just really neat and clever and they want to play with. So based on all that, our formal recommendation is for mystery science. We've had some teachers piloting or exploring this resource this year, and that is one term that triggered something in my brain that you'll hear a lot with NGSS is the phrase explore before explain. Mystery science does a really nice job of providing us with the opportunities to allow for that exploration, that play, that investigation before coming up with the words and all of the descriptions that just capture everything that's happening. So there's a lot of figuring out, there's a lot of discovery that happens, so we're really excited about the possibilities that this brings. Any questions?
Any questions or comments from the committee or the board?
Do Crow and Tom Servo come with it?
It looks like a really good tool, and it's nice to see that there's teacher and parent enthusiasm for it, and so I think this looks great.
With the difference in cost, we are excited about the professional learning that we're going to be able to provide, and like I mentioned, the leveling up, that augmentation that we can look into and develop.
Can you talk a little bit about the reading level in the program?
The reading levels are on par for, you know, elementary experiences, but what we're going to try to do is just integrate some of the work that we're doing with structured literacy and the science of reading and provide nonfiction and informational texts to support the students' investigations.
I was really impressed at the agenda meeting last week, just how closely the two final programs were rated. And I was also impressed that the decision wasn't made because of the price, but the price difference is a real benefit, that we're getting so much without paying so much more for two programs that were rated very closely together. I like two phrases that you said, Dr. Dormer, the phenomenon learning, and also explore before explain. It seems like the committee did a great job selecting this.
Yes, I give them a lot of credit for all the work that they put into this process.
Any other questions or comments before we vote to approve? Okay, approval is sought. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? It's 3-0. Thank you, Dr. Dormer. And next we're going to hear about some departmentalizing that will be happening at the elementary level. Dr. Missett.
Thank you, Director Darnell. Great, thank you. I am going to update you on departmentalizing at the elementary level and the work that we have done and the work that we will continue to do, not only to the end of this year, but all of next year. I'm going to take you through a couple areas tonight. I'm going to take you through the why. Why are we doing this and why are we doing it now? We're going to talk about the big buckets that we talked about during the researching phase and the implementation phase of departmentalization. We're going to talk about where we went. We visited some neighboring school districts to understand how they are doing it, why they are doing it, and get a little tidbits from them to make sure that we are just as successful. We're going to talk about the professional development that we have started with our 4th and 5th grade teachers and what it looks like throughout the summer and next year. And of course, the next steps, where are we going, and again, why. Before I get into the real why, I want to tell you the 3 buildings, the 3 out of the 11 elementary buildings that will be doing departmentalization in grades 4 and 5. East Goshen is one of them, Fern Hill, and Starkweather. And the reason why we chose those 3 buildings, and we put a lot of thought into this, was due to the fact of the school's size, the school's needs, and really the how we can move this along in those 3 buildings. Some buildings are Title I buildings. Obviously, Starkweather is one of our largest buildings, and Fern Hill is one of our smallest buildings. So when we're talking about departmentalizing, it's going to look different at Starkweather than it is going to look like at Fern Hill and East Goshen. The why. We sit in an instructional cabinet once a week, and Dr. Reynolds always wants to know the why. Tell me the why. What's the point? The why is because of those 3 areas up on the screen, but they're more than those 3 areas. When we talk about buckets, they're very similar but very different. All of those 3 whys on the screen is because of students. We want to keep that as the focus. It's because of students. We believe that stronger student learning outcomes will be achieved. Our students will not only be working with just one content area teacher, but 2, at least 2, for next school year. And that's important to know, that they're going to be interacting with their, obviously, their special area content teachers, but also with another content area. That's important. Better communication skills, better relationship building skills, those kinds of things. Another area is that we're going to increase engagement. What do we know most and best about our elementary students? They need to move. We've got to get them up and moving. They can't be sitting all the time. So this will allow them to move from classroom to classroom. This will allow them to move from section of the building to another section of the building. And lastly, is probably the most important, is we're going to enhance differentiation for our kids. We are going to have content experts in 4th and 5th. We are not going to have teachers in those 3 buildings next year that are going to be generalized teachers in 4 areas. So we're going to have one teacher who's an expert in math, one teacher in that grade level who's an expert in ELA, and then those content areas are social studies and science. So we really think that that's going to be important for those teachers to drill down those kids and only those kids in those content areas. So that's an important why. We believe that. I've talked about the big buckets, and I can't see that screen, so I have to go to my screen. The big buckets, we talked about them being separate, but yet very, very similar. When we talked about the instruction and student experience, when we talk about instruction, we need to talk about not only what we are teaching, but when and why we are teaching it, the pacing guides. That's going to be important, that we try to stay very similar in those 3 buildings to test out and make sure that we are doing everything that we need to get through during the course of the year. The logistics and operations is really the logistics. What does that master schedule look like? What does those transition times look like? Meaning, we want to minimize the transition time, and the middle schools and the high schools have done this really, really well. But we also want to mimic that. We don't want it to take 7 minutes to get from one classroom to another. So we're really strategizing where these classrooms are throughout the building. We do certainly want to talk about the resources that we will have for our teachers. And that's a part of the professional development I'll talk in a little bit. But also the communication is one of the most important things. We are already planning to have a night for parents, current 3rd and 4th grade, rising 4th and 5th, to come in and listen to almost this presentation and why we are doing it. Because the idea is in 26, 27, that all 11 elementary buildings will be doing departmentalizing in grades 4 and 5. This was a fun part of this process, when we got to go to other districts, and we brought a team. Really, the team might have been between 15 to 25 people, depending upon the day and everyone's availability. But we visited Downingtown, Avon Grove, Phoenixville, and Haverford. And all 4 of those districts, they started departmentalizing in grades 4 and 5. Phoenixville starts in grades 2. And we decided that that's, and not for us at this time, do we want to go lower than 4th right now. Maybe in the future, I don't know the answer to that. But we know that we do not want to do that at this time. But the 3 other districts, and obviously they're not in our district, our county rather, does start in 4th and 5th. Again, I got to go to my name. So the teachers were charged with looking at not only talking to the teachers and listening to the teachers, but they were charged with looking at their daily and master schedule and what that looked like. They also were asked to take notes, and we had a reflection sheet for each visit about the parent communication. What does that look like? How often does it happen? And does it come from department? And then most importantly was the PLC. Do their PLCs in those 4 districts, do they meet as a department PLC or as a grade level PLC? And quite frankly, we don't have the answer to that right now on March 17th. We will have the answer to that. We just need, we're still working through what is best for the teachers right now. After the site visits to these 4 school districts, we did have the principals, the teachers, multiple times attend to get a different lens on what's happening outside our district. After these site visits, we did gather our 4th grade teachers on February 26th and our 5th grade teachers on February 27th, and we spent the afternoon talking about what we learned on these site visits and really getting to know one another. We actually started the afternoon off with a get to know you, because although that sometimes our 4th grade team across the districts get together, not all the time. So it was nice to meet new faces and to talk, but we really did spend time in stations around this room talking about what did it look like in Downingtown, what did we like, what we think we could improve on, or what we could do a little better, and move from there. But those 2 days at the end of February were really neat to be a part of. Dr. Brown was there to really listen to the teachers. And they had strong opinions of what it should look like. And you know, they're the ones that are going to be making sure that this happens, and it happens with fidelity. So we spent a lot of time listening to them. So the next steps that we are going to do, we're going to take, we are going to be offering some content-based professional development for our 4th and 5th grade teachers, depending upon what content they are going to be teaching next year. We already have March 27th on our calendars to do some collaborative work with the IU, that they will be coming in and teaching some, our ELA teachers that we already know. And something else to note and to share with you is that the teachers that will be teaching content areas already know what they're teaching next year. So they are aware of that they're going to be the expert in this content. So they're going to be the ones that are attending the specific days, one for ELA and one for math. We charged the elementary principals at Fern Hill, East Goshen, and Starkweather to create several master schedules, and they have until the end of next week to do this, to create several master schedules, and what does that look like, and what's the best model for us to use next year. We started a master schedule at the elementary level back when we started full-day kindergarten. When we started full-day kindergarten, we went to a master schedule, so we knew that we could have 4 specials for our kindergartners, so everyone could get common planning time. It's been 8 years, and it's time to revisit our master schedules. There are things that have changed, updated curriculum, all those things, so we're looking at the master schedule at the elementary level. We also are going to be holding that community night in April, and we will make sure that we communicate this multiple times with our rising 4th and 5th grade families in those 3 buildings. And into next year, what we'll do is really start communicating it out for all 11 elementary buildings. We're excited about this work. We're proud of this work. We think it's good work, and we think that it's needed work. So with that, I'm going to ask if you have any questions.
I
have a question, just because I want to make sure I follow. This is going to be implemented for the first 3 schools starting in September,
Correct.
and then it'll be somewhat as a pilot to be expanded to all 11 at some point?
Correct.
Would that be the subsequent year?
Yes, 26, 27. So starting 26, 27, we hope to have all 11 buildings on board, ready to go with the master schedule and the teachers for implementation for 4th and 5th grade.
Thanks.
Sure.
I have a question. When the students then in 4th and 5th grade will go to separate classrooms for ELA and math, is that the plan, if I'm getting it correctly, will they be differentiated or separated all based on their learning, their achievement levels, or will each teacher in each section still be teaching the different levels of the subject?
So yes and no. So we will have a content expert in math, we would have a content expert in ELA, and we would have a content expert in our content areas, social studies and science. What would that look like in each of those rooms? Would be that expert teacher, I would hope, would differentiate to different levels for those groupings.
Well, will the students move then, so they're in, Mrs. Jones's class so they'll move around all day. Will they move around together? I guess that's my question. Will a group of 25 students in 4th grade move together into each of the...
The plan for right now is that they would move by homeroom.
Okay.
But keep in mind, there might be more than one classroom from a homeroom, or a half of it, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? It'll be exciting to see how this develops. Thank you, Dr. Missett. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Reynolds to welcome our guest, my friend, my boss, Marita Barber. We're glad you're here. I'm going to pitch it over to Dr. Reynolds to welcome you.
Thank you so much. On an annual basis, from our Policy 140 for Charter School Review, we do have Collegium, particularly our school leader, Mrs. Marita Barber, come and provide an update for where the school is performing in their achievement levels, as well as their demographic areas and their updated enrollment. What we did decide as a committee that we would present the updates before you as far as how the school is performing and their levels of celebration and continued growth. If you have specific questions, Mrs. Barber is here to answer any questions the board may have. If there are none, that the presentation is available for your review.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Barber?
I have a question. I'm just looking ahead, and maybe, I'm sorry, I missed, we're not getting a presentation? I'm sorry.
We provided a opportunity for there to be a physical presentation or for the board to review the presentation that the charter team had presented to us. And so they presented the information for your review. If there are questions, you can absolutely answer them, but there'll not be a formal presentation from the team.
I think, is there a chance for us to see the PSSA exam scores? I see the charter school versus the state average. Are the numbers available for us to look at versus Coachville averages and Westchester area averages?
Comparing those two districts for Collegium specifically, that's something that we can request of the school, but I will note that what's in policy is that we just provide an expectation for the school to update on their performance alone. So if we did an expanded analysis, we can make that request, but that's something that we would then have to look at to compare for Coatesville as well as our Westchester numbers. That's easy. We can provide that for a comparison. But Collegium, as it's outlined, we just have them present on their own data.
I would be interested to see the numbers versus the Westchester numbers. Thank you.
When I had reviewed the presentation earlier, the same question had occurred to me in terms of the SAT tests. That we have the snapshot of the 2 years of SAT tests, but they're not really contextualized except against the state average.
I mean, I do realize that a majority of the students come from Coatesville, so I would also be, I would be very interested to see the numbers versus the Coatesville district numbers.
I'm just curious why, because I know in past years there has been a presentation. I know there's a PowerPoint, and can you just explain why that changed?
Absolutely. So we discussed as a committee, when we reviewed the agenda, we made a change in the policy for 140, and one of the things that we didn't have explicitly as far as there to be a physical presentation, we just had an update. So what we did this year is we asked the school team if they would like to come and present, or if they'd like to just share their presentation, and that's when they said they'd like to share the presentation, however they'd be available for questions.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Dr. Reynolds, and thank you, Mrs. Barber, for being here. I'll see you at work.
Thank you.
Okay, and next we'll have an equity update from Dr. Brown.
Good evening, everyone. Looking forward to tonight's equity update. It's kind of inclusive of more than just the past couple months. It encompasses a handful of areas, but I do want to kind of reiterate access, opportunity, and support, which is how we define equity. Access to rich, rigorous, relevant, meaningful learning experiences. Access to solving problems in the classroom with multiple answers, providing evidence, reasoning, and reflection from students, ensuring that they have multiple paths to success, opportunities for agency, opportunities for leadership, opportunities for success, and then support really is grounded in connection, belonging, where students are respected and valued, and we look at their social growth. So all of that I will reiterate a few different times in a few different ways, but that's the core for us of where we lie with equity. You'll notice in and around the room our student works of art. To this month is National Youth Art Month. Sorry, I'm on slide duty. I got it. This is National Youth Art Month. So some of that access, opportunity, and support is showcased around the room. Additionally, 2 weeks ago, I was at East High School doing an observation and sat and watched a literary circle from our juniors, where they were talking about the book Just Mercy. They were using evidence from the text, providing reasoning, rationale, and talking about themes and author's purpose. It's an excellent book, one that I read a few years ago and actually used for one of our, my only book club for parents. So student access and opportunity, what does that look like? I have some samples for you. These are some images that we have from not just last month, but also the month prior. Black History Month celebration, school-wide learning projects, and one of our schools held a Black History Month museum. And pictured is one of those samples of student works, We also had Black History Month research projects that were complete by students, and then I actually participated and went to Exton for what was referenced as a book tasting, held by Katie Carlin, who is the librarian there. She turned the library into what she referenced as a French cafe. She and I both donned aprons and fake mustaches and engaged with students as they read books about various Black figures, some of them historical in nature, Louis Armstrong, Booker T. Washington, some current, Amanda Gorman, LeBron James, but it was a host of different figures from Black history, even current Black history, that the students engaged in. They had a great time. They were able to access the books either through reading, which some chose, most chose, or they could listen to the books as well. Here are a few other images from different Black History Month experiences. You have 2 images at the bottom for research projects for MLK, and then the kids are doing some work with some artistic work for some Black figures. And additionally, we took 6 students 2 from each of our high schools to Upper Marion School District for the Delaware Valley Consortium Equity and Excellence Leadership Summit. And they sat and listened to keynote speaker Carlos Ojeda, who delivered a message that was don't fight back, it was fight forward. He is an inspiring speaker. I've heard him a couple times. The core of his message, although it was don't fight back, fight forward, was really grounded in his experiences as a student. He came from a unique area in northern Jersey, and his whole motivation and how he found success was through the connection and relationship he developed with a specific teacher. So the kids spent most of the morning, part of the morning, listening to him, and then they all had different breakout sessions that they attended throughout the morning. And then they had lunch, and then came back to school. Our next area is restorative practices. I think I delivered a message on that earlier, where we were going to have Rachel Cutney come from the IU, do a session with our DELT team, which she did. We're going to have Rachel Cutney come back, and TLE is hosting her for 2 days in June for a session on restorative practices, which aligns that idea of Tier 1 connection belonging for students with SEL, self-awareness, social awareness, and allows students to kind of develop a better sense of not just who they are, but the impact they're having. So when teachers do have issues with kids, they're addressing those issues from multiple lenses, and they've developed a relationship with the kids to be able to have a more engaging conversation around the behaviors and the why and things of that nature. I remember eons ago when I first started teaching, a man was retiring. I went to his retirement party, and he said in that retirement party, they'll never care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's the relationship before learning premise, and that's kind of where restorative practices falls. It's developing the relationships to build the learning capacity. And finally, back in mid-February, I attended the 41st annual Alice Thomas Scholarship Banquet. It's hosted by the Henderson BSU. The kids do a great job. And they always choose a keynote speaker, and this year's keynote speaker was Ivana Wiley, who is a Henderson grad, BSU president, BSU member for 4 years. And she spoke very eloquently about the impact that her schooling had on her current choice as a CEO of the Chester County OIC. And the work directly that impacted her as a kid is now impacting her as an adult. And when you think about our definition of access, opportunity, and support, she's still living that out. She is providing access, opportunity, and support for the current people that she serves in her workplace, which effectively are our community members. So that is our equity update for the month.
Questions or comments?
I have a question, again, this is for clarification.
Yep.
In terms of some of the terminology. So when we talk about restorative practices, what are we restoring?
Oftentimes you're restoring relationships between people. So if it's 2 kids who are in an argument, you're restoring the relationship between those 2 individuals. It can be relationships between student and teachers. So you can engage in that same level of conversation with those 2. But more often than not, honestly, with our experiences as building leaders, is you're restoring relationships between people. Kids don't always see eye to eye. They get in arguments, they get in conflicts, and helping them understand self-awareness, social awareness, the impact of their decision-making on not just themselves, but their larger community and the individual who may have been harmed. And then you're also having that same conversation with the kid who was harmed, and helping them to understand and navigate the rationale behind the behavior.
So in essence, if I interpret that as children who've demonstrated problematic behavior in the school, is that fair or?
Fair, but it can be common problematic behavior. Kids saying something that isn't terribly nice to someone else. I wouldn't, classify it as anything other than that.
and I think I shared this example before. It's like if a student, you know, and we do restorative practices at Collegian. You know, if a student doesn't know how to ride a bike, we teach them. If they don't know how to bake, we teach them. If a student misbehaves, we punish. Well, why don't we teach? And that's what restorative practices does. It teaches, you know, perspective. It teaches empathy. It teaches listening and collaboration. And so it really is helping to give these students the skills that they're going to need for the rest of their lives when they're interacting with peers, family, co-workers.
100%, yes, thank you.
I also, and Mr. Director Parkinson and I both attended the Alice Thomas BSU banquet, and it was just such a great experience. I want to encourage every board member next year to go to it, because it's not just for Black people, it's for the community, and the BSU is a big part of the community at Henderson, and Henderson's a big part of the Westchester area community. So I hope all of us will be there next year. Giovanna Wiley, I had not met her before, just a little bit of context. She took Joyce Chester's position at OIC in Coatesville. And meeting her for the first time and hearing her speak, she was the right pick to fill Joyce's shoes. I don't know many people that could fill Joyce's shoes, but her speech was amazing. It was amazing. It was a great time. If there are no other questions or comments?
I just have a
Yes.
question. Can you tell me a little bit more about the BSU and the student equity teams? Like, how do they get together, or what do they do?
So the PSU does any number of things. Honestly, it's a cohesion place. I don't know how many of you have ever seen any of our BSUs at any of our schools, but it is very much not limited to Black student unions. There are white students in our BSUs, there are Hispanic students in our BSUs. It's a pretty diverse group of kids. But they are really just about human connection more than anything else. Our student equity groups are also very diverse and pretty much about the same thing. It's really developing context for the world around them, the differences in people, acknowledging those differences, and that's really kind of part of the equity focus is that authenticity that we show up with. Every kid shows up as an authentic person, and we're recognizing them for who they are, and so those groups kind of own that philosophy.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, thank you so much, Dr. Brown, for that update. Appreciate it. Finally, the next meeting for teaching, learning, and equity is going to be April 11th, and that's a Tuesday evening. And with that, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.